in the very first hearing on this war, where lawmakers can ask legitimate questions of the Pentagon, instead of getting a sober and fact-finding scene, it became a circus of shouting, insults, and deflections, mostly from Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth. And in one instance, like he's done with the press, he's questioning the patriotism of anyone who dares to ask questions about the war, or anyone who criticizes it.
The biggest challenge, the biggest adversary we face at this point are the reckless, feckless, and defeatist words of congressional Democrats and some Republicans.
The president has got himself and America stuck in the quagmire of another war in the Middle East. He's desperately trying to extricate himself from his own mistakes.
My generation served in a quagmire in Iraq and Afghanistan. The way you stain the troops when you tell them 2 months in, Congressman, you should know better. Shame on you. Calling this a quagmire 2 months in. The effort, what they've undertaken, what they've succeeded, the success on the battlefield that could create strategic opportunities, the courage of a president to confront a nuclear Iran, and you call it a quagmire, handing propaganda to our enemies. Shame on you for that statement. And statements like that are reckless to our troops. Don't say I support the troops on one hand, and then a 2-month mission is a quagmire. Who are you cheering for here? Who are you pulling for? Our troops are doing incredible work.
So that was the tone in a nutshell over on Capitol Hill. And Geraldo, I mean, I think one of the problems with what Pete Hegseth is saying is that Americans very recently have been in a place where they've been told, support this war effort because it's the patriotic thing to do, only to find out that they were lied to about how they got into the war, only to find out that that war effort was going to last decades. And some of those very troops were asking, why were they there? What was the end game? Isn't it the patriotic thing to ask questions?
Well, yes, unless you're in uniform in combat and it's a violation of your of the chain of command. I think that with Pete's case, the frustration comes because people were saying that the War Powers Act and the various congressional resolutions over the years indicated very strongly that the President of the United States had the ability, the constitutional right to be Commander-in-Chief of our armed forces and to wage a conflict like this if he felt it necessary or he or she feels it necessary for the national the defense of the country. So I don't think that what Pete did, aside from being maybe overwrought in his dramatic presentation, playing Othello there, just kind of silly maybe. But there's real tension though between the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of the United States and the Congress, which has the constitutional right to declare war. So you have this tension constantly. Yeah. And Pete mentioned Afghanistan and Vietnam and Iraq, and yes, it is quagmire in the modern day because we don't do total war anymore. But his frustration, I think, is real over the fact that he feels in that setting, in the setting of Congress, that he's among enemies, not friends.
But he's frustrated that people are questioning the war. But the polls show that it's pretty widespread. It's not like a niche thing just among Democrats on Capitol Hill. Those conflicts you mentioned, the Iran war is as unpopular as Vietnam, as Iraq. And on top of that, what I thought was fascinating, when you ask Americans, when you consider all the costs and benefits of this conflict, is it worth it? Overall, just 25% of Americans say that it's worth it. And among Republicans, where generally you get a lot of support for what President Trump is doing, only 58%. So fewer than 60% of Republicans say it's worth it. This is more widespread than just Democrats on Capitol Hill.
It's definitely more widespread than just Democrats on Capitol Hill or across the country. It's also independents that you're seeing move towards their discomfort with the war. And I think part of it is not only that we don't have a defined mission, we don't know when we're going to actually leave and pull ourselves out of this war, but it's also when our price is going to go down. And I'm sure we'll talk about, how high gas prices are for Americans around the country. But I think that is sitting very uncomfortably with people as they go to the pump. I mean, that is something that you can see every single day ticking upwards. And the fact that someone is driving by their gas station every single day and seeing that number continue to rise and rise, and you're wondering from this administration when we're going to get clarity about when this ends, and they still can't give it. I think that's why you're seeing the polling sink for Republicans, and particularly Donald Trump, because people are placing blame on him for not laying out the case for why we went in the first place to Iran, but also understanding when we get out. So I don't know that, you played the clip of Congressman Garamendi questioning Pete Hegseth and saying it's a quagmire. I don't know if we're there yet, but we're certainly at a place where when does this end? Even if the administration likes to play a creative game with the law and interpretation, I don't think we have an understanding of how this ends and when.
I mean, Pete, is it smart for them to say that anybody who criticizes what they're doing in Iran is unpatriotic? Is that a smart political strategy?
Well, there is a line between asking questions and oversight on the part of Congress and the legislative branch and these Democrat members of Congress calling it a quagmire, calling it a destructive and disastrous war, saying that it is a forever war. Within hours, within days of this conflict starting, they were already saying it was a forever war. So I understand Secretary Hegseth's frustration at some of the rhetoric that is being used. Questions can be genuine. They can get to the bottom of what's happening, but they're sitting there making it a partisan spectacle. And look, he's not perfect either. The Secretary of Defense got defensive and personal in some of his responses and lobbing barbs back across to the dais. But I look at this, and the polling also, Washington Post had a poll that showed 79% of Republicans said it was the right decision. So there's been all this talk about erosion among the Republican base, the MAGA base, but they still stand with President Trump. They believe it was the right decision. I would also point out that the very nature of conflict is opaque. That is just the way conflict goes. And there's a balancing act, but there's a balancing act between disclosure and concealment. And that is one that every administration has to balance. And so in some respects, the public, unless there is a full-fledged PR campaign, which there could have been, maybe should have been, but you also throw away the element of surprise.
Well, you'll remember with the Iraq
you
War,
also
President
harm
Bush
operational
went to
security.
the people and he asked, he laid out, even if you disagreed with the war in Iraq and why we went in for the mission set that we did, he still went and laid out the case to the American people.
Great.
Well, I mean, do you think it's turning out that great right now?
All that lead up time to prepare for an attack.
I don't think that was not the thing.
That was not the reason.
In this case, I do believe
that wasn't the thing that made the difference. The problem with those wars was that we weren't going to be able to rebuild.
The element of surprise is what we needed, and sometimes
the people are certainly surprised by their gas prices.
I do think both conflicts, if there is any similarity between both conflicts, it's in that the objective, which in the case of Iraq was nation building, which could not be achieved, and the objective here, which in the case of Iran is sort of a rehabilitation of the nation, perhaps. They have no nuclear weapons. They stop funding terrorism. It's unclear if that's going to be achieved either. That's the only similarities between the two.
No, the greatest
things.
similarity is that both of these conflicts were built on lies. We had a functioning nuclear deal with Iran. Barack Obama is probably the first person to ever earn his Nobel Peace Prize a few years after he got it. But many nations came together to form this nuclear deal with Iran, and our military swore up and down for years that Iran was complying with the deal up until the moment Donald Trump tore it up. So if you're going to come out here and say we have to do this war because we can't let them get a nuke after this is the same team that tore up the deal keeping them from getting a nuke, they're essentially saying you have to believe our military was lying for years when they maintained.
You want to bet? What if you're wrong? What if Iran is really, as the president indicated, on the verge of creating a shortcut to
well, imagine the surprise of all the Republicans who believed him for years when he said no more wars, no more wars. He swore up and down Kamala Harris would do this. He would.
I think
it represents a lie.
Saying no more wars.
I would say the one thing.
No, it's
it is the dumbest thing.
The one thing that, to answer Geraldo's question, I mean, we don't have a lot of actual hard evidence about this one way or another. We do have the sworn congressional testimony of the Director of National Intelligence, who said that after we bombed their facilities last summer, they had made no efforts to reconstitute their nuclear program. Does the president just get to say whatever he wants and we just have to say, we trust you? I think we live in a democracy. I think the American people deserve the right to ask questions, to demand evidence, to demand proof. And the reason they deserve that right is because they have been lied to before.
But do they?
And you can't just say, trust me, okay?
There is
you
no
can't
reason
just say,
to
trust
indulge
me.
Do the American people have the right to tell the commander-in-chief how to wage what he perceives to be a war against the
They have
They
to
do.
ask.
Now,
They
foreign
have-
policy
they're-
should not be dictated.
No, wait, hold on.
polling.
This is taxpayer dollars. This is
We're
our
paying for
money
this.
being spent on munitions to go and bomb Iran. Absolutely, I think the American people have a right to at least be explained why we're in this.
But we
And
also have a
it's-
right to free speech and to petition the government for redress of grievances, and there is no reason for anyone to believe anything these men say ever.
And it's also
they have
the
lied
government's
so
right to
much in the
withhold
course of
information
this
in the interest of
conflict.
national
Trump has
security.
already come out and said he wants the oil. There is no reason to take them at face value. And Abby, you're one of the best cable news hosts in the world. You're brilliant. You're so great at this. But I would never hire you to a cabinet position overseeing the Pentagon. And you're a good cable news host.
Thank you.